Chapter 8. After the deportation, the wailing of old women could be heard from nearly every window and door in the ghetto. 7,000 husbands and fathers, wives and mothers, brothers and sisters, and children had been taken to their deaths, or so we heard from survivors. Rumors were whispered in the streets that shootings in the woods were too much trouble for the Nazis. Now they were gassing Jews to death in trucks and boiling their bodies to make soap, or so it was said. The thought of that made my stomach turn. There were more deportations, but for a time, they were smaller selections, like those that had come before. And my existence in the ghetto, it wasn't a life, just an existence, went back to what it was. Those who could work were not taken away, and so, reluctantly, my father and I showed up for work details every morning. I was assigned to a tailor shop, and the work was manageable, but it seemed as if my former life, school, friends, time to play and read, belonged to another world entirely. One afternoon, after work, I made a fateful decision. I went by a friend's house instead of going directly back to my family's rooftop hideaway. If I had gone straight home, if I had gone out to get our rations with my mother and father, things might have turned out very differently than they did. The streets of the ghetto were empty when I finally headed home that day. The emptiness would only mean one thing: another deportation. When the Nazis came looking for Jews to deport, all the people who lived on the streets found places to hide. They had to, or they'd be taken. Men and women with homes to go to put their heads down and hurried there by whatever back alleys and side streets they could. I skirted down Wagowsko Street, ready to duck behind a busted-up piece of furniture or hide in a pile of old rags if I heard the Nazis coming. I was almost home when I heard the bark of German officers around the corner and the shuffling of shoes on pavement. I scanned the area for any place I could hide, but there wasn't one. I squeezed myself into a corner on the other side of a short set of stairs to an apartment building and tried to disappear into the shadows. The Nazi officers marched by in the street in front of me. All they had to do was turn their heads to see me, but they kept their eyes forward, followed by a ragtag group of Jews who were being deported. I watched them go by, a few hundred or so, their heads bent low, and every one of them silent as the grave. Wait, there, in the middle of the crowd. I froze. Was that my mother and father? I stood on my toes trying to see into the mass of people, but the angle had changed. I was standing in plain sight now, my head and shoulders well over the top of the short flight of stairs, but I didn't care. Were my parents in that deportation? Maybe I'd just seen a couple who resembled them. I wanted to scream. I almost ran to the column of marching Jews to call my parents' names to find out if that really was them, but the sight of the German SS officers bringing up the rear stopped me. If my parents weren't being marched right now, I'd be caught and never seen them again. But if it was them... As soon as the prisoners and their guards were past, I dashed out from behind the stairs and ran all the way home. I burst through the door to our apartment building and raced up the stairs and pounded on the big metal door to our rooftop hideaway. The bars were still over the door, which was good news. That meant someone was still up there. I prayed it was my mother and called through the door to her as I pounded away. Behind the door, I heard the steel bars being lifted and I stopped knocking, my heart racing. The door opened, and my cousin Sala stood behind it, tears running down her face. No, I said, no. My knees went weak, and I closed my eyes against the truth that was coming. Yannick, Sala said, Yannick, thank God you're all right. Where are they? I demanded, even though I already knew. Sala, where are my parents? I'm so sorry, Yannick. The Nazis grabbed them as they were coming back from buying bread. I saw them taken right there in the street in front of the building. I staggered through the door and into the pigeon coop that had been our home, our sanctuary for more than a year. It was totally empty. I fell to my knees and sobbed. Sala put her hand on my shoulder, but I could barely feel it. Mama, Papa, they were gone. My family was gone. I felt like my heart was being wrenched out of my chest. The emptiness of the pigeon coop weighed heavy on me. I was the only one left. How would I survive? Why should I survive? Maybe I should just go and give myself to the Nazis, I thought, with bitterness, with defeat. No, I thought. I wiped the tears from my eyes with the back of my sleeve. My parents would not want that for me. In the place of my pain, I felt the stirring of determination. I would not give up. I would not turn myself in. No matter what the Nazis did to me, no matter what they took from me, I would survive. I was 13 years old, and my parents were gone. I was all alone in the world, but I would survive on my own.